Good evening and welcome. I'm Officer Robert Reeves, and I serve as the Public Information Officer for the Irving Police Department. Thank you for joining us for our first ever Facebook Live Community and Law Enforcement event. All of you are helping us be stronger together by participating in tonight's event and doing one of the most fundamental tasks of communicating and talking to one another. Due to the current pandemic of COVID-19 affecting all aspects of everyone's lives, our normal type of communication with the community through our outreach programs is just not possible right now. Recognizing the current events and the most recent incident involving George Floyd, we recognize that our community might have some questions for their police department as it relates to policies, police misconduct, and anything else that someone might be wondering. This is a time for our community to ask their police department the questions that they do not know the answers to. An officer made the suggestion several weeks ago that we should have a virtual conversation to address all of these current issues. We started working on putting together a panel and have brought different community leaders from Irving in tonight to help represent some of our different communities. Our moderator for this evening is Jaime Vasquez. Jaime is an immigration attorney that practices in the area of Dallas-Fort Worth, a former prosecutor that worked with the Dallas District Attorney's Office. He was tasked to develop programs that reduce crime in high-risk areas by working with local governments and school districts to do so. He was the Hispanic community liaison and was tasked to bridge the gap between the Hispanic community and the District Attorney's Office. A former member of the Board of Directors for Irving Cares and currently serving on the Irving Police Department's Training Advisory Board as a community member. Please welcome Jaime Vasquez.
Thank you very much, Officer Reeve, and thank you for everybody who's watching with us tonight. We have a great program. The idea is that we have a conversation. So if you're watching right now and you have any questions, please comment, place your questions in the comment section on the Facebook account. Share this video and like it. The idea is that we can have all the information that is relevant to the community and that this information goes everywhere. And the idea, if you do that, we will be able to have a good conversation. To start today, we have a great group of panelists, and I'm going to start sharing with you their bios. And we will start with the Chief of Police, Jeff Spivey. Chief Spivey began his career with the Irving Police Department in 1986 as a public service officer and worked his way through the ranks, serving or supervising in all areas of the department. He has been appointed the police chief in March 2017. He holds a master's degree from Sam Houston University and is a graduate of the 252nd session of the FBI National Academy, the Senior Management Institute for Policy and Leadership Command College. He is current chair of the Caruth Police Institute Advisory Board and serves as a trustee of the Board of Directors for the Police Executive Research Forum. With us tonight also we have Tony Grimes, president of the Irving Carrollton NAACP. Tony is a successful entrepreneur, a president of the Irving Carrollton NAACP, a deacon of the Antioch Christian Church, chairman of the board of JNB Outreach, a member of the Irving Mayor Diversity Council, the Irving Police Department Advisory Board, and the Carrollton Police Advisory Board, a trustee of the Irving ISD, and is an employee of the Rosewood Corporation. As a president of the Irving Carrollton NAACP since 2002, Tony has multiple partnerships throughout the Irving and Carrollton area and has worked diligently to increase the membership and credibility of this chapter. For his services, he has been recognized by the Texas State NAACP Torchbearer Award, the City of Irving Service Award, the Alpha Phi Alpha Golden Legend Award, Service Award from the Texas Organization Project, and the 2019 Irving High Spirit Citizen Award. We have tonight with us, and he's not here yet, and he will join us in a moment, the Most Reverend Greg Kelly, Vicar General of the Auxiliary Bishop of the Catholic Diocese of Dallas. Bishop Kelly is a native of Iowa and grew up in Colorado Springs, Colorado. He studied for the priesthood in the Holy Trinity Seminar at the University of Dallas here in Irving and was ordained to the priesthood in 1982. He served in several parishes in the Dallas area since then and has been served as the auxiliary bishop of the Diocese of Dallas since 2016. He has lived in Irving since 2008. Bishop Kelly has been involved with the Dallas Area Interfaith, Catholic Charities of Dallas, the Immigration Task Force, and is in the Board of Trustees at the University of Dallas. We have Charlie Cavazos, an officer with the Irving Police Department, who has been a police officer for 29 years and currently is assigned to the Community Service Division. Assignments include Citizens Police Academy in both English and Spanish. It's a coordinator of the Juntos con Irving outreach program, crime prevention education for multifamily communities, and the Special Olympic fundraising coordinator. Additionally, with us, we have Deepan Patel, representing BAPS Indian American Community. Deepan is a local volunteer and spokesperson for BAPS Dallas, as well as a member of the BAPS National Public Relationship Committee. BAPS is a spiritual, volunteer-driven organization dedicated to improving society through individual growth by fostering the Hindu ideals of faith, unity, and service. Personally, Deepan has lived in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex with his family for over 25 years and is engaged in various businesses as investor and entrepreneur. Additionally, we have Heather Foster, owner of the Latrice Saloon and member of the Shop Talk member program. A native of Southern California who has been an entrepreneur for over the past 26 years in the DFW area with such businesses as the Latrice Saloon, Shop Until You Drop Personal Shopping, and Wardrobe Consulting. Heather has worked in numerous educational fields to include Dallas ISD, Texas Tech University. She holds degrees in early childhood education and liberal arts. She's an active member of the Irving Police Department Shop and Talk, Dress for Success, and a host of other community efforts. Heather enjoys serving others and making a difference with her community whenever it's positioned and planted. Additionally, we have another officer with us, Dario Moore. He was born and raised in Long Island, New York. He's very far away from where he was born, but he moved to Atlanta in 2012, where he worked for the Atlanta Police Department for 5 years. And he joined the police department as a lateral transfer in 2017 and was assigned to the patrol division until recently when he moved into the personnel division. We have Travis Allen, another police officer with Irving Police Department. He's a lateral transfer from the Dallas Police Department, where he worked for 4 years and has been with the Dallas Irving Police Department for the last 8 years. He has worked in the patrol division, problem-solving unit, and now is in traffic division as a motor officer. He participates in different programs, including Pride, Positive Role Models in Drunk Education, Bigs in Blue, Big Brother, Big Sister, and soon will be participating in the Shop Talk program. He's also a volunteer with Widows and Orphans Network, led a men's Bible study prayer group, and participated in the Alert Cadet International. Richie Miller, Sergeant with the Irving Police Department. Sergeant Miller has been in the force for 27 years. He's currently served as the supervisor with the Community Service Division, has worked patrol, community services, school resource, personnel recruiting, and various youth programs through his years. He currently is a Big Brother, Big Sister program volunteer. Thank you, everybody, for being here with us today. Just to set up some rules for everybody who is watching us, we are going to have a conversation today. We're going to have questions. Questions are coming from members in the panel. Questions are coming from Facebook. For everybody who's watching us on Facebook, I'm repeating this again. Your voice is important. We want to hear from you. Please put a comment, put a question, and we will do the best to answer all the questions posted. We're also going to have questions from our members, but most importantly, we're going to have a conversation. We also want to hear from the officers, not just responding or answering questions, but also commenting on what is going on. We have questions that will touch a lot of different topics. And to start, I'm going to pick on some of our members, and I'm hoping that you're prepared to ask some important questions that are coming from the department. We have a big group of people, and we will hear from us. And Chief, I'm asking you tonight that we have our officers answer questions, but we also want to hear from you because we want to hear what measures the department has taken with regards to policy changes and what's the future of policing in Irving, in the city of Irving. All right. So from the members today, who will want to go first? Let's see. Heather, will you want to jump in and ask a question? Heather, we have you on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, hello everyone. Yes, my question is, how is the Irving area, I know it's very diversified, but what I'd like to know is how is the diversity within the department in terms of equal rights for women there? That's a question I like to ask. Do you have very many women in the Irving Police Department working in any capacity?
So we have a question that deals directly with personnel. Sergeant Miller, do you want to jump in and help us start the conversation with regards to diversity? I do have a couple questions about that. So let's see if we can lead a conversation that deals with diversity and women hiring and women positions in the department.
Okay, absolutely. So in regards to diversity with women, to answer Heather's specific question, we have women working throughout the department in a variety of different positions, whether it be as police officers, investigators, supervisors in a variety of different formats within our jail division, within our records section. There's a cross section of women working in pretty much every part of our police department. I've been here for 26 years and I've watched that grow. I'll be honest, when I first started here, it was not that way at all. But there has been, I'll say, a concerted effort, and that's not just Irving PD. I think there's been a concerted effort across the country as it relates to that specific subject to try and diversify the workforce, not just racially, but gender-wise as well. And I think our department has made significant strides there and will continue to make those sorts of strides.
Well, thank you very much, Sergeant, for the question. Tony Grimes, the president of the NAACP. Tony, what kind of questions do we have? Tony, we have you on mute.
Sorry about that.
Not a problem.
I really don't have any questions. I've got a comment I'd like to make.
Perfect.
I've been, as you mentioned, I've been a member or been the president of the NAACP here since 2002. And we have had great relationships, and it didn't start that way. It kind of, the police Chief Boyd and I kind of developed a friendship and relationship, and we started developing community relations, like the forum that we're having now. We started law enforcement and youth. Chief Boyd retired, Chief Spivey took over, and we just kind of kept the norm. And actually, Chief Spivey has kind of increased the community service over what Chief Boyd was doing. Chief Boyd, I thought he was doing a fantastic job. And now Chief Spivey is taking it to the next level. So I applaud the Irving Police Department for what they bring to our community.
Perfect. Chief Spivey, Tony raises a great point, and I think it's one that we have seen in the city of Irving with the police department, is that involvement in community, trying to reach out to all sectors of the community. I do have a question, and I want to find out from you, what do you feel? I know the answer is straightforward, why it's important, but what do you feel that being and building those relationships with the community is not only assisting the community, but it's also assisting your officers?
Well, I think as you look at what's going on across the country right now, in cities where developing relationship, developing trust, developing legitimacy between the police department and the communities they represent hasn't always been a priority. And when you have an incident, you have a controversy occur, you then try to build on those relationships in the middle of a turmoil. And you're never going to be successful. You have to do that work on the front end. It's just like any other relationship, a relationship between a husband and a wife, a parent and a child, a business owner and his or her employees. If you're not working on that relationship and building that trust every day that you have the opportunity, when that event occurs that causes a rift or causes that trust to be questioned or causes the legitimacy to come under a microscope, what's going to occur is a breakdown in that relationship. And so, one of the things that I was fortunate enough to take on when I took over as chief of police was a department that understood that and understood the importance of developing relationships. And to continue that on, continue to look for other opportunities, other community groups, other community leaders, because if you're not working every day to get better, you're immediately beginning to become irrelevant. And that's something that I've really tried to instill in our organization is every day, no matter, what Mr. Grimes said is great. I love hearing it, and I love the relationship that we have with the NAACP. But if I was to ever take that for granted, if the Irving Police Department was to ever take that for granted and say, we've got a great relationship with the NAACP, we can just rest now, then that relationship is going to begin to deteriorate. We have to work on that every day. And it can't just be with the NAACP. It has to be through programs like Shop Talk, where we've met Heather. It has to be programs where we partner with BAPS charities and do the events that we do with them. It has to be with our Juntos program. Because we're such a diverse community, we have to expand our opportunities to connect with those community members and prove that we're trustworthy and legitimate.
Perfect, perfect. Now, we're going to move a little bit. We're going to talk about a couple of those issues in a moment, Chief. But before we get to that, I would like to give Deepan the opportunity of joining us and seeing if Deepan, the Indian community in Irving, is it's part of the now of the businesses. We've seen the involvement of the Indian community in the whole area of Irving. So there is a lot of concerns. Let us, what kind of questions can we have from them?
Absolutely. So I'll start off with saying that Chief Spivey and the entire Irving Police Department in the city of Irving, they do a fantastic job at being a part of the community and understanding different cultures. So I want to applaud them for that first and foremost. I think Chief mentioned BAPS charities. We use that as a platform to identify and support causes that are important to the community at that given point in time. And current times, it's COVID-19. How do we give back to our community using different platforms that are already established? So that relationship, as the Chief mentioned, it's all about nurturing that. And through that process, we develop that understanding between different cultures. So one question I do have is, and a lot of times we'll have families that visit from different parts of the world, and they may not be well versed in the way of life here in the US or the law enforcement protocol due to the language barriers or cultural barriers. And how has the Irving Police Department responded to these situations? And part two is, are some of the neighborhood watch programs aware of these things? Because promoting that understanding allows us to work with each other better. And we've done a great job, as the Chief said. We have worked really well with everybody, and would like to hear what has Irving Police Department done to address some of those situations.
So that great question. And I think that Charlie, Officer Cavazos, I would like to follow up on the question that Deepan asked, because I know that you have been involved in the multifamily programs and reaching out to communities in multifamily. So we have, as Deepan mentioned, a very diverse, and the Chief of Police also mentioned, that we have this diverse community. But before we go to the question, I wanna welcome Bishop Kelly. Bishop Kelly just joined us. Bishop, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing very well. I'm sorry I'm late.
No, not a problem. I know you have a good excuse.
It's the best one I got.
So Bishop, we already started the conversation. We are discussing right now. We have a question from Deepan Patel, who is a representative of the BAPS Indian community in Irving, and he deals with minorities, and he deals how the police department is acting in reaching out to minorities, or having the understanding sometimes that it might be through diversity challenges of how to approach different communities in the area of Irving. So I'm calling on Officer Cavazos, who is involved in many programs that deal with diversity and communities in the area.
Well, first of all, I want to say, thank you for being a part of tonight's event, to everybody that is involved. We really honor the opportunity to share this time with you and our community, because we know that there's a lot of concern right now, and we want to do our part to address it. I had the pleasure of meeting Deepan actually several years ago at some of the BATS charity events that they host and promote for the community. And so it's been a good few years ago that we met, and it was during the holiday season, during the Diwali festival and some other events. And so to speak to those kind, I mean, first of all, it was an honor to be invited to be a part of it. So, you know, just that trust and those times that we were able to spend together allowed us to be a part of the celebration from a culture that I wasn't used to, being Hispanic and from South Texas. But it was such a pleasure to learn and to be a part and to learn something brand new in my brain that I had never had the honor of being able to witness. So over the years of being a part of the programs that the BATS charity promotes, has given us and several of the guys from my division, including Sergeant Richie Miller, the opportunity to learn about the different cultures that we have. So it's been great. Another, you know, we talked about, we have our different minorities and different cultures in Irving. We've had the opportunity, even in something as simple as our National Night Out events that we have, because Irving is so diverse during our National Night Out events, different communities that we visit, we're seeing firsthand how they interact with each other in their communities, in their neighborhoods, and they're so receptive to the police and the firemen as we come out on National Night Out. And it's just moments like that, whether it's one night or over a weekend, or just the ability to spend time with different communities and the different cultures in our communities. It makes us realize that we have a lot to learn from each other. And so that's something that we've enjoyed, that I've enjoyed personally, and I'm lucky to have had that opportunity.
Perfect, perfect. Bishop Kelly, I'm going to put you in the spotlight. I went around the room and I have all the moderators already ask a question. And I want to give you the opportunity to see if you have a question that you want to ask to the police department, or if you have a comment that you want to share with us.
Good evening, everybody. Actually, I'm a resident of Irving also. I live at Holy Trinity Seminary on the campus of the University of Dallas, where I also had done my studies and served as chaplain. So I've lived in Irving longer than any other place that I've lived. You know, and the two, actually, you know, Irving has a lot of Catholic institutions in it. There are two parishes, Holy Family out in kind of Northwest Irving, and then St. Luke's on South MacArthur, in very different communities. And then around the University of Dallas, there's a Cistercian Abbey, and University of Dallas, and some Catholic schools. I think one of my concerns in just thinking about this night is, you know, there are a lot of, and primarily Hispanic, but not exclusively, immigrants in Irving. And that I know they've worked with the, very grateful to Chief Spivey and to the department for working with, especially the parishioners of St. Luke's. You know, just to know that the Irving Police Department is there to protect them also. You know, no matter what their immigration status happens to be, that the police department serves the whole community. You know, that they're a witness to a crime, or they're a victim of a crime, that they have some claim to, you know, to make a report, or to, without fearing that they're going to end up in the immigration system. And so I think I'm just grateful for your efforts to work with them, you know, with the Parish ID program, and just your conversations through Dallas Area Interfaith has been, I'm just very grateful for that. That's really what, you know, it's more of a comment than a question. Yeah.
Well, Bishop Kelly, I appreciate you bringing the point of the immigrant community in Irving. as an immigration attorney myself, I didn't want to be the first one to bring up the topic because I didn't want to sound biased, but now you're bringing the topic. So I do have a question, and it's related to what you mentioned, and I will pinpoint to any of the officers that are on the street. Bishop, you mentioned the importance of the immigrant community in participating with crime fighting, with reporting crimes. We're living through a very difficult time. It's one of a kind in our generation or multiple generations for us, is this COVID-19 being in the house. And unfortunately, we've seen an increase of domestic violence in many homes. The abuser and the victims are enclosed in the same home for many hours. Now we're seeing more and more people going out in the streets, but at the beginning of this whole COVID, we have all these issues. So I want to ask the officers in the street, what kind of measures, what are you seeing? Do you feel that the immigrant community is contacting the police when they're victims of a crime? What do you feel? What is the temperature check on the street? And how much easy makes your job to be able to protect the community if the community is in contact with you? So I'm asking about, let's see, Officer Moore or Officer Allen, any of you, I know that one of you used to be in patrol, now it's impersonal, but let's see what your experiences are with the immigrant community, and particular, as we mentioned, the other communities, the Hispanic, the Indian, the Middle Eastern community in the area. Just to make a side note, and we hear this coming a lot, that Irving is very diverse. I remember reading an article in Newsweek magazine that the 75062 is the most diverse zip code in the whole United States. So we have a lot to say about that.
Yes, as has already been mentioned, I just first off want to say I'm grateful to be here, grateful to have an opportunity to engage with the community and the other panel members. Communication is very important, and I'm glad I'm able to not only speak, but also to listen and learn from everyone here. I had the pleasure of working on the north side of town, at the north station and the south station. And so I saw different demographics based off of the locations I was working in. As far as the community and the diversity that we have in communicating with the police, I thought it was great. We were getting the feedback we needed. From what I could tell, that the calls were being put out there, and unfortunately there were domestic violence incidents and other crimes to be reported. But when we got on scene, it was very fluid. The individuals that we were contacting, whether they were the victims or the suspects, for the most part, we were able to assist them, even with language barriers and cultural differences that didn't play a role. We were able to treat them the same, and they treated us with respect. And both on the north and south side of town, it has been fluid, even with the difficulties that COVID brings and the family dynamics that come with that. I haven't seen the officers miss a beat, and our community has done a great job of not only giving us the information that we need and being able to detail what happened very clearly. We also have a language line where if there is a language barrier, that we're able to contact right away with no delay and be able to facilitate that communication even better. And the citizens are patient with us as we are patient with them. And honestly, it's been great to, even in this time, it's been very fluid.
Right, perfect. So we have some questions that are already coming out through Facebook. I'm going to ask some of these questions, and we're going to get to some difficult topics. We wouldn't be able to have this conversation if we don't address what is going on right now in our society and what has happened in the past months, the past years. And I need all my panel members to chime in, to comment. You're representatives of your community, and we can have this conversation in a very, very, very productive way. But I also want to hear from the department. And starting with that, we've seen the images, we've seen what is going on. And we have a question from Debbie, and she says, please share your thoughts about the state of defunding the police and its potential impact in the community safety. Before we address the defunding, we need to understand that policing have gone through a lot of changes, but many members of the community in many parts of the nation don't feel safe. And how is the process of defunding and safety is taken here in Irving? Chief, I think this is a policy question, and we would like to hear from you on that.
Thanks. I think we need to start with understanding the concept behind defunding the police. because there's two different definitions or two different thoughts behind this idea. One, which I think is the original intent of the concept of defunding the police, is to take money from the police budget, apply it to social services, and allow those social service agencies to provide responses to social service problems. The other part of defunding the police is truly about abolishing the police department and finding a different way to provide public safety for our communities. And I will tell you, I think that's right up front, that's a horrible idea. That's going to lead to increased violence, increased crime, feelings of less safety. And so if we want to talk about defunding the police from an aspect of providing more funds to social service agencies, homelessness, mental health, after-school programs, reentry programs, I think that's a conversation that we can start. But before you start taking money from a police budget, you first need to stand those programs up. And then once you have them stood up, you need to prove that they can be successful and that they can last and remain productive within a community. Because if you start by taking the money away from the police department and start putting towards programs before you know that they can handle the job that they're being given, you're going to create a vacuum where the police are still going to be expected to respond, but they don't have the funds, the resources, or the personnel to do so. And you've yet to create the safety net of that social program to step in and fill that void. And so I think as you look at this, you want to start with funding those social services, get them up and running, get them successful, and then see what pieces of the police responsibility you can then start having those social services take on. And then and only then can you start looking at, well, if the police aren't responding to mental health calls any longer, if the police aren't responding to juvenile crime any longer because you have after school programs, if the police aren't responding to minor crimes due to joblessness or poverty because you've addressed the poverty through jobs programs, you've addressed homelessness through providing affordable housing, then you can start looking at the workload of the police, and maybe you can start taking funds away from those because you don't need as many police officers. But just to start with taking money out of the police budget and applying to areas without giving them an opportunity to prove that they can be successful, you're going to create that vacuum where crime will thrive, violence will thrive, and frustrations within our community will grow because we're not able to respond the way we should.
Perfect, Chief. Now, we have another question. We have a question that is coming from Philip. And what is the police department doing right now to try to break the mold or the idea that you guys don't become cynical and it's at us versus them? And I think that if we tie these two questions, and Tony, I wanna get an input from you also, because we want to talk a little bit about what's going on right now. These questions about defunding, these questions about confrontation between the community and the police departments are coming because we're looking at the news and we're seeing in many parts of, in these unfortunately, these events where we're looking that people of color sometimes are a higher number of issues with the police department. And I would like to hear from the NAACP, from your chapter, what are you guys doing with regards to education? What are you guys doing with regards to the police department? So the culture, it's understandable.
As I agree with what Chief Spivey said in regards to defunding the police department. That was my thought. If you saw me raise my hand, that was my thought as well in that regard. What we have done for a number of years is consistently to educate our community on how to handle encounters with police encounters, and that's been very successful for us. So when we see something like what we see in the news, all across this country. I always thank God for where we are and the relationships that we have with our police department, so that we have communicated and educated our community well enough to know how to handle that situation. What we always remind everybody to do, if there's a concern that you have upon a police encounter, what we ask you to do is offer respect to the police officer that you have the encounter with. And if you have a concern, just call me. When Chief Spivey or Chief Miller or Cavazos do our law enforcement and U events, they always make sure that everybody has my number, and Chief Spivey's given his number. So if there's a concern, we can address it. We don't want those concerns addressed upon the encounter.
Perfect. So Heather.
Yes, yes. I want to also just say thank you for the Urban Police Department for allowing me to be here, as well as the founder of Shop Talk, Officer Plunkett. My question is this. When you have a certain, let's see, what is the police policy in pulling someone over, approaching someone that looks suspicious? Now, this is for anyone, on the panel today. Anyone can answer this question. Just want to get a better understanding. This comes from within my network, a client of mine, which is a female. She wants to know that specific question. Can someone answer that? Can someone speak to that, please?
Okay,
Hey,
Officer
Heather.
Allen.
Hey, could you offer me a little more information? You said when someone gets pulled over for looking suspicious. You're still on mute.
Okay, I apologize. Suspicious.
I might be able to actually help articulate what you
Okay,
mean.
thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
So when you say looking suspicious, so officers are trained to learn how to criminal profile. It's not a game of chance. Sometimes it's a game of chance, but mostly it's not. There's certain indicators you look for criminal profiling, and I could spend 2 hours talking about this when it comes to biochemistry, physiological responses, proxemics, a whole science behind profiling criminal behavior. But you said, what does a person do when they get pulled over for looking suspicious, right? The same thing you would do if you got pulled over for any reason. You give the officer the benefit of the doubt that he is acting within the scope of his authority. You comply with anything that he tells you. When you get pulled over, you are detained until you're told to do so. If you have any grievance with what he did or even how he did it, you most certainly should bring it up to the department that he works for. And if it's an issue, then you need to gain an understanding about it, so that you weren't served a raw deal at the end of the day. So any officer he has a responsibility to tell you, help you understand how did we get to this spot? Speeding, or I noticed you hanging out in the back of this hotel for quite a while. Just came to come talk to you. A whole slew of scenarios that you could list that would have that situation.
Thank you. I appreciate
Add
that.
to that, Heather, and Mr. Vasquez, what I've noticed, Heather, if there's an issue like that in our city, we can address that pretty easily. But the goal is always, if you're encountered by law enforcement, just respect the officer so that you can drive away. And that's what we teach in our workshops. Respect the officer so that you can drive away. Once you drive away, you give me a call Chief Spivey, or probably anybody that's on this panel right now can get you to the appropriate people to address whatever that concern is. It's unfortunate, and we teach this. I learned as a young man. Police stops were police encounters were more often with African American men for a long time growing up, and we've come out of that tradition here in Irving. Can't speak for any other department, but the majority of the stops would be an African American man, kind of the suspicion that you just mentioned. But I learned to put my hands on the steering wheel, obey the officer, and drive away. Currently in Irving, we can always get to the city or internal affairs and have that stop investigated. So I've seen over the years, I've seen fewer and fewer of those complaints come through the Irving Police Department.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes. I appreciate that.
Sergeant Miller.
Yeah, I'd just like to, oops.
We have you on mute.
My apologies.
Perfect.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to add just a little bit more to it. So her specific question was about stops and suspicious people and that kind of stuff. And there's a couple of rules that go along with that kind of stuff. If we're going to make a traffic stop, generally speaking, we're going to have what's known as probable cause. You're speeding, your lights are out, something to that effect. You didn't signal a turn, whatever it might be. But let's say it's someone just on the street and we want to talk to them. That's something that, generally speaking, we would call a consensual encounter, where we're just going to go up and start talking to the person and see what's going on, introduce ourselves, find out about that person. Now, that person has no obligation to continue that conversation if they don't want. They can walk away from it and we walk away from it. Now, if we have what's known as mere or reasonable suspicion, that means there's something criminal that we believe is going on, but we haven't reached the level of what's known as probable cause. Then we can detain that person and talk a little bit more and investigate a little bit more to find out what's going on. And it may go in a fashion to where we develop that probable cause and move further, or it may turn out to where, okay, there's nothing here. And then we send that person on their merry way and we go about our merry way. So like Mr. Grimes mentioned before, our goal when we contact somebody is to see what's going on and for us to leave when it's over and for that individual to leave when it's over as well. And that applies to traffic stops. That applies to encounters with people on the street in a variety of different formats. So I just wanted to add that little piece.
Perfect. So we have a few more questions in our Facebook. So I'm going to read you a couple of them. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to go a little bit on a lightning round. And some of these questions are directly to the police department, and some questions you community members can chip in. But we're going to try to get some of these questions because we are getting a few questions. So I appreciate everybody who is watching on Facebook, who is liking this video, who is sharing it, who's giving your thoughts on it. Chief, we have a question that deals with mental health. And I'm going to ask you this question because the question goes directly to you. And I want to ask because you and I had a conversation a few years ago in one of the meetings of the advisory training board, where the idea came out to create a mental health unit. What was the idea behind this? Do we have people who are specifically in charge of handling cases that deal with mental health? And what's the benefit of that?
So we do. We have a mental health team made up of 3 police officers, a supervisor, and a clinician. Their responsibility is when they're on duty to respond to those calls for service involving mental health issues, whether it's someone in crisis, whether it's someone attempting suicide, or whether it's just someone who's having struggles for the day. Maybe they haven't taken their medication. But what we want to do is, instead of having police officers respond and make those diagnoses, we want the clinician to be on site. We want the clinician to be able to interview that person, understand what treatment protocols they've been in before, be able to recommend treatment, ensure that they're prescribed the right medicine at the right doses and taking that medicine. So that's one leg of that program. The other part is when they're not responding to calls, they're doing follow-ups. They're going to those high frequency users of mental health services, and they're just checking in on them. Are they taking their medication? Are they seeing their doctor? Are they able to go to work or go to school or remain functional in their life so that they don't find themselves in crisis, and we're not then responding to a crisis as the police department. And so that's the second part of that leg. And then the third part, and I think what makes us really unique in Texas, is we have the first police department sponsored behavioral health leadership team. And this behavioral health leadership team is made up of professionals from across the Metroplex in a number of different service industries: mental health, medical, social services. And this group meets on a regular basis to talk about the programs that are available, the resources that are available. They meet with our mental health team to give them guidance and direction and suggest ideas and solutions to problems that we've encountered, just to ensure that we're providing the type of service that our community, especially our mental health community, needs, so that we keep them as safe as possible. So many of our uses of force, even and especially deadly uses of force, involve people who are in mental health crisis. And if we can get them treatment, if we can keep them on their meds, if we can keep them going to their doctors, we avoid those crisis situations.
Perfect, perfect. Now we have a few questions, and I think you have covered a lot of points on the mental health. We had a lot of questions, about 3 or 4 that I'm reading right now, that deals with mental health. If any of those questions were not answered, or you feel that you have any more additional questions, please let us know and ask them there. Now, I want to ask you a question about how to report crimes, because we have a few questions that deal with people asking how to increase patrol or how to stop some certain criminal activity in the area. If somebody in the community wants to report, it's not a 911 call, it's not something that is going on, but we have issues with speeding in certain parts of the city, or races going on. How can somebody call and report these so the police department is on top of it and know what's going on? I don't know if any of the officers want to take on that and answer that.
Yeah, I'll talk on that, Chaim. One of the things that we try to do is always use our, in the crime prevention section, we try to use that as our platform to help educate the community on what they can do to report crimes and keep us aware of what's going on. We do crime watch meetings at multifamily communities on a regular basis. During my Citizens Police Academy classes, both in English and Spanish, we always try to focus on what the community can do better in efforts to keep keep our community safe. Father Kelly earlier was talking about St. Luke's. We've had forums at St. Luke's on a couple of occasions where we have talked to, people have gathered in the hundreds as we've had these topics of conversation, these topics of immigration and crime and what to do. And our goal is always to try to educate our community on how you can avoid being a victim of certain crimes. And basically the advice is always the same. You have to be able and you have to be willing to speak up. You've got to be able to report crimes when you see them occurring. You've got to be willing to take ownership in your neighborhood, in your city, in your community, on your street, in your apartment complex. You've got to be willing to take ownership in that, because at the end of the day, if our citizens are not reporting the crimes that they're witnessing, us as a police department are not aware of what's going on. And if we're not aware of the crimes that are occurring, how can we address them? So the main thing we try to do is just the education to our community about crime reporting. Because again, the more crime reports that come in, the more we are aware of what's going on, we can address these things. I saw a couple of the questions that popped up about How do we reduce crime in Las Calinas? Cars are getting broken into, things of that nature. The main thing is just awareness, being aware of what's going on, being aware of where you're parking your car, being aware of the lighting, say in your apartment community that's out, and speaking up, reporting these issues to your apartment complex manager. In neighborhoods, reporting those security lights out to your Encore, the electrical companies, the companies that provide those lighting or whatever it may be. And of course, always reporting crimes to the Irving Police Department so that we can be aware of what's going on. But the main thing is just educating. And on our website, people can go and find, we have multiple crime prevention flyers with just basic tips, you know, how to better secure your home, how to better secure your car, things of that nature, just simple crime prevention tips that we don't think about every day. But if we take the opportunity to review those periodically, then that becomes you know, a constant for us and a standard of what we do on a daily basis.
Perfect. So we have a question in Spanish. So anybody who's watching right now and it wants to ask a question in Spanish, please feel free to ask the question. I will be able to translate it. So we have a question and I'm going to read it in Spanish and then I'm going to read it in English. El Departamento de Policía tiene fotos en español ya que Irving, la mayoría de la población es de habla hispana. I think the question goes to, does the Irving Police Department has any kind of photos or pictures in Spanish? Because the majority of the police, the population in Irving is Spanish speaking or Hispanic. And I think the question goes more into how is the interaction of a police officer who is not bilingual, who does not speak Spanish, with a member of the community who does not share the same language. And I think this question goes in general. Deepen, it goes with your community. In the Indian community, it goes with our Middle Eastern community, it goes with our African community. How is the police department able to interact or have been able to have a conversation? What tools they have, how they're approaching diversity in stops, in how issues are presented when there is a stop and you're not able to communicate?
Well, one of the things that I can, for the Spanish community, and they were asking if we have, si teníamos más fotos. So all of our crime prevention material that we distribute, we equally distribute it in English and Spanish. When I'm working, for example, with a particular apartment complex, and I regularly reach out to them and send them crime prevention material to share, either at the mailbox wall or through their means of disseminating their information, which is for a lot of apartment complexes, they use email with all the residents. But anytime that we send crime prevention material, we try to send it in both English and Spanish. So just to try to get that out there for everybody. A challenge for the future, you brought up Deepen, yeah, that's another, you know, when we think about that, you know, we have newer officers that are now of Indian descent, that we are now being able to bridge that gap. But you know, we're still a little bit behind the curve there. But you know, we're making strides and we're doing really good with that. And I think that's just going to be a matter of time as well. But as far as for the Spanish community, Haim, I think that we're doing really good in disseminating our information to them. But I'll say this as well, because I tell this in all my meetings that I have with my Spanish-speaking community, the importance of when we come to the United States and we're trying to live a better life and we're trying to make a better life for our family. I always preach to my friends, my students, the people I have meetings with, the importance of learning a little bit of English and doing your very best to learn just some communication skills, because there is those moments where an officer who speaks no Spanish has somebody on a traffic stop who speaks no English, and there's just, they cannot communicate. We teach our officers, our young rookie officers, we put them through Spanish classes as well while they're in the police academy to try to teach them a little bit of conversational Spanish. And I preach the same to my citizens. I'm like, if y'all can learn a little bit of conversational English, we're going to get places. So again, just through the education of that.
Perfect. So we have another question that comes from Facebook, and this one comes from Delhi Ekambo, and is, does Irving Police have any culture, and I think more about the process of reporting police officers that might have some issues or being problematic? And I think that this question goes to one of the topics that I wanted to address with the department, which is the review of officers. We've seen through the news, we've seen through some of the stuff that is going on, that after the fact, when something happened, something comes out where this officer had X, Y, or Z in their history. So what is the process for Irving Police Department to review officers? And what happened if there are some issues with an officer? Officer Allen.
Yes, sir. All right, so we have multiple venues for holding officers accountable. And also those same venues are for clearing officers of false accusations. Each officer that hits the street by policy is to carry an active body worn camera with them to record the interactions. And those have been, in my opinion, the best addition to police work in at least my career, for two things: for evidentiary value, as well as putting all the information on the table. I'd rather have my supervisor, upon a complaint that I receive, I'd rather have him just watch the video than for him to get my testimony and the complainer's testimony and go back and forth, and him to try to figure out what the truth is. Right? The videos are fantastic. That's one method, just their direct supervisor. There's also, we have an internal affairs division, and if you, as a citizen, start an official complaint through internal affairs, it will go through the full gamut of the investigation to make sure the truth is out there, and if any correction needs to be made. And a citizen is not punished for making false accusations, at least not to my knowledge. I've never heard of a citizen being threatened or punished upon utilizing the complaint process. Also, you mentioned you hear about something happens in the news, and the news will get a hold of their file and say he's had 12 complaints in his career and 2 complaints for excessive force. Officer Moore could come make a complaint on me if he wants anytime. Doesn't mean I've done something. He can make a complaint and it has to be investigated, right? So I haven't looked, but there's got to be, in my career with Irving, I've got to have a couple dozen complaints on record. None of them have been, I guess, be founded. None of them have been valid. They've all been investigated and deemed not that I haven't done something wrong. I'm just guessing. I don't know if I have 24 or not, but it happens on a regular basis. You know, I'm a traffic officer. I pull over 8,000 some odd people a year. Some people are going to be unhappy with it, and they're going to make a complaint.
So these complaints are reviewed.
Every single one of them. They're
taking their time, and I believe that based on what I'm hearing from you, when a complaint is made, it's just not dismissed right away. There is an investigation. There is and if nothing happened, your name is clear. But if something happened, I believe that then it will proceed with a more deep investigation. Sergeant Miller, you in personnel, what can you tell us about that?
Yes, I would love to respond to that. So yes, any complaint that comes in is going to be investigated, whether it's by that officer's immediate supervisor or internal affairs, as was mentioned earlier. And we're going to respond back to that citizen with what our findings are, regardless of what they are. People need to feel comfortable saying what it is that they feel, if they feel that they've been wrong, and to know that there is a venue or process that we have in place to deal with that issue. No, on the side of the road is not the place for it. You make that phone call after that contact has been made. And what will happen is someone like myself will get your side of the story. We'll wind up at some point, talking to that officer. We'll look at whatever investigative materials there are out there, as Officer Allen mentioned before, body cameras. And although those are a great, well, you know what, they are a great tool. They do tell a story. Sometimes there can be more to the story as well. So we have a responsibility to be accountable to our community, first and foremost, but we also have a responsibility to the officer to make sure that this is done fairly and equitably. Oh boy, I screwed that word up. To be sure that we go about the process in the way that we need to, and to make sure that we get the information back to the community member of what the findings were and how we came to those findings. We want to be transparent in this process. And that, to me, that's part of, and one of the biggest ways that we have legitimacy with our community. So,
if I could.
Yeah, of course, Chief.
Just to follow up. So there's more than just one way for the police department to investigate the conduct of one of our employees. Certainly a citizen filing a complaint initiates that process, but we also have a very robust reporting system. And anytime a police officer uses force, anytime a police officer is involved in a chase or has an accident or an injury, anytime a police officer gets a complaint, all of that goes into a reporting system. And we have a threshold built into that reporting system that flags that employee once that threshold is reached. And so an employee can have a couple of uses of force, a car chase, and a complaint. And if those happen over a 6-month period of time, maybe no one really pays attention or recognizes that there could be a problem here. But that reporting system does that. That reporting system flags that employee, notifies our professional standards commander, who then looks at all of those instances that cause that flag to, or that alert to occur, and then sends that back down to that employee's immediate supervisor for him or her to look at, just to ensure that there's not something occurring that we need to be aware of. Police officers get into a lot of different events, and so most of those red flags are just because the officer is very active and could have a short period of time where they have several different things happen at one time. And so there's really no cause for concern, but that reporting system allows us to look at that just to ensure that we don't have a problem employee, so that we can address it before something tragic happens.
Okay. So we have Bishop. I'm going to put you in the spot because we have a question for you directly. Theresa in Facebook asked, Bishop Kelly, do you see any need for improvement from Irving Police with involvement in our parishes? And if so, where and why?
Well, going back to what Officer Cavasso said a little while ago, I think their involvement with particularly St. Luke's, and I think so oftentimes it's the face-to-face interactions with people. It's not the Irving Police Department in some kind of abstract with a siren going down the street, after somebody. It's a person with a face, with a voice, with a Spanish voice. I mean, so that they understand the language. I think that those kind of interactions make a huge impact. In fact, I heard a story from several years ago, and it came to me like third hand. So I don't really know the facts, but the way it came to me was they were having some kind of a meeting at St. Luke's, and the police were just parked outside, like intimidating people. And I'm sure if you peel it back several layers, that's not what happened. Well, I mean, it could have, I don't know. But what's happened since, has been the efforts on both sides to develop a relationship, so that so that the people at St. Luke's have faces and voices, and the Irving Police Department has faces and voices. And so that makes just a huge impact.
All right, perfect. So we have another question that comes from Mary.
Could I ask a question?
Yes, of course, Bishop.
Just listening to the discussion about defunding the police, which I think is an unfortunate term because it tends to be equated with the second meaning to abolish PDs. But, and then the discussion about the mental health units. And I remember a comment that Chief David Brown made 5 years ago or 4 years ago in the police shootings in Dallas about so many expectations being put on the police, and that is it, I mean, I think, you know, maybe you feel that yourselves, but for the police to have a unit doing mental health, is that a good arrangement, or is that just the arrangement that got the, you know, because you guys saw a need and it helped you in your work of responding to these kind of calls, and it kind of took it out of direct police officer work and more kind of almost medical, you know, which is more important. Is there some thought given to what's the ideal arrangement for these kind of services that have tended to get all clumped into the police department, but may have better homes in other places?
So I'll take that on. You bring up a really valid question, and the answer is complicated. I will tell you that I think that service belongs somewhere else other than the police department, but it has to be funded to such a degree that you're taking a preventative measure as opposed to responding to the crisis. And so in order to get to that place where the police really don't have a need to be involved, we're going to have to create a system where everyone who needs those services is able to get those services, no matter their ability to pay for those services, their ability to get to the location where those services are delivered. So you have to create such a massive program that reaches the entire community, that affords those community members the ability to take advantage of those services, or you're going to have individuals who find themselves in crisis. Many times the police don't need to be involved in those situations, but there are a number of times where if you were to send unarmed civilians into those situations, you would have more people hurt and killed because people in crisis don't think properly, just by the nature of the disease that they're facing. They're not in their right mind, and so they're going to do things, they're going to behave in ways that are dangerous to themselves and to other people. And so unfortunately, the police are the only ones who can then provide that response, because we do have the training and the tools necessary to deal with that violence that comes with those types of responses.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. So we have another question that comes from Facebook. And Heather, this question goes directly to you. Carl asks, how has the Shop Talk helped in the Irving community? Heather, can you tell us a little bit about Shop Talk? What is it? What's the benefit? How do you get involved? And what benefits have these drawn into the community?
Absolutely, yes. I can share with the community that this program that I'm involved in, Shop Talk, founder Officer Plunkett approached me maybe a couple of years ago about this program that is a liaison with the beauty industry. So it would be, you know, barbers, nail technician, estheticians, however, within the community. And it is such where the police department actually comes in to our environment in an unthreatening way and just kind of, you know, ask questions, allow the patrons as well as myself to ask questions in a manner where, you know, it's not like, it's very unalarming where you know, normally you would be alarmed if a police officer came within your office, or, you know, all of a sudden, you know, people are like, you know, a little on edge. But they come in and allow you, again, to ask questions, questions such as what happens on a routine stop, or You know, it could be anything, what's happening in the community. And it's been really very valuable within my own business because my customers feel very comfortable with asking questions, as well as the police department always willing to answer the questions very honestly, very candidly. And, you know, it's an even exchange, which I have really appreciated. So I have really benefited, my customers have benefited, and we do have our monthly meetings, which I really enjoy, also giving more feedback and getting an opportunity to know what's going on within our community. And, you know, it's just been a great benefit. I'm just really happy to be a part of it.
All right, perfect. Thank
I
you
hope
very
that
much,
answered
Heather.
your question.
Oh, it did. Thank you very much. And just to recap a little bit from the questions that we have on Facebook, we have received a few questions on the same topic. So when I ask the question, I try to make it a little bit more general. That way we can answer all the questions that come related to the same topic. Now, I want to talk a little bit about in some of the questions that we got, and this question comes from Bob, and he says, how is the staffing levels within the city of Irving? I understand that cities like Dallas are significantly understaffed upon per capita basis. And before we get into the question, let me just send a message to everybody watching. If you have a question, please post your questions on Facebook. I will be able to cover them and hopefully we can get through it. If you see that a question you posted, I haven't answered it, we might have already answered it through the video, depending on when you join us. And we have been having this conversation already for an hour and 15 minutes. So we have covered a lot of material already. And I want to jump in right now with the question that Bob asked from Facebook in regards to staffing, because we have a series of questions. So we have the understaffed, and cities are showing that understaffed, and also the hiring of minorities. This question goes to the Hispanic community. This question goes to the Indian community, and we have discussed the interaction between the department. But what are the numbers? Is the Irving PD understaffed? And also, with regards to staffing, what are the efforts of the Irving Police Department to hire from different minorities?
I can take that question, sir. As far as the staffing levels for the Irving Police Department, I came from a larger department, and the issue that I experienced was officers would come in, they would get their experience, and due to a multitude of reasons, they would then go on to a different department. So I know that is an issue with other cities as well. Within Irving, thanks to the department itself and the many benefits that come with that, and the community, having that support from the community, so having a good working environment to come to, officers stay here. We don't have the same we don't have a revolving door like some other agencies have. I know currently we have roughly 8 positions available, and that a lot of agencies those numbers are a lot higher, especially in those larger cities and maybe in areas where the departments aren't supported as well and the camaraderie isn't as good. But within the Irving department, I say only have 8 positions available. There are more positions on the horizon, but I mean, we have a test on the 22nd, and I encourage anybody that has a Saturday free to come by and take the test. We are accepting walk-ins. But yeah, it's a great place to work, and I think that shows by our numbers and how long people stay here. I mean, we have guys that are on patrol for their entire career because they love that side of things, and that was unheard of in my previous department as well. So as far as our numbers go, we are doing, I would say, very well. As far as diversity, once again, I'm very new, so I say very new, but I've been here probably the shortest period of time as it compares to the other officers here. And from the beginning, Chief Spivey and the other representatives of the department have said that they want to have a diverse department. They want the Irving Police Department to match the community that we police. And I've seen that in the hiring efforts and the different backgrounds that have been hired on by the Irving Police Department. It's not looking for X candidate or this candidate. It's a body of work. What is this? How can this person benefit our community that we serve and better our department? So I'm sure there may be some other additional comments, but it's been told to me from the beginning that that is a goal to make a more diverse department.
I would like to comment on that as well. I'm going to take it a step further than that. The city of Irving, part of that was in the question, is very diverse in their hiring at all levels. Chris Hillman, the city manager, is doing a fantastic job to make sure that he's hiring a full round of candidates that are very well qualified for the jobs that they serve in. Just when City Hall opens, take a walk through City Hall, and they can see the diversity that we have in our city of Irving, is employees in our city of Irving.
Perfect, perfect. And Sergeant Miller, I think you had a comment also on that, right?
Yes, I did. As far as the recruiting efforts are concerned, I did work in that office for years, and our department is very deliberate. We actually travel the country trying to tell people about how great a place Irving is and how great a place this police department is. And I'll be honest with you, as I mentioned, I was blessed to work in the office and literally visit police departments from California to New York, and nothing against any of them, but I'll stack this one up against any place in the country. And the reason I will is because of the quality of individual that our department seeks out. We've got two guys here right now. I know you were going to touch on it a minute ago, but I'm going to jump into it now, who are lateral officers. When we go and actually hire lateral officers, as the chief mentioned earlier, I was one of the people who did that. We will literally fly to whatever city that officer worked in, and we'll spend a few days there. We won't just look through the IA file, as the chief mentioned before, but we will go and interview their supervisors, their coworkers, their family members, that kind of stuff, because of what was mentioned earlier. We don't want somebody else's, we don't want someone else to give us something that they may not necessarily want themselves. We want to maintain the level of quality that we already have and improve it. And quite honestly, the two guys sitting here right now, both Officers Allen and Moore, represent exactly what that is. And it's amazing going to these cities. Most departments, when I would set foot in the door, would say, what in the world are you people doing? You're actually flying out here to find out this kind of information? Well, to me, it says something about not just what kind of department we have, but what kind of city we live in and what we want to be about. So it just, that's something that really mattered to me. So I wanted to make sure I got that out there.
Perfect. All right. So I want to ask a couple of questions, and I want to make sure that we touch some of the issues that we're looking at just in the nation and changes in the policies. I want to know what's the department is doing with regards to de-escalation. It's a term we hear a lot, and it's a term that I want to find out what this department is doing with regards to de-escalation, and at the same time, if we can put that together with policy changes that have come based on the unfortunate events that we've seen in the past months. Who wants to take in that question? It's a very important question. This is your moment of fame.
So I'll tell you that I would prefer, I'm going to give you the chief answer, right? I would prefer.
Give me the chief answer, because I don't want the answer that says we're making policy changes. No, I want to know, you tell me what are the policy changes that the top brass have decided that are important for the department to be able to do their good job.
So I'll tell you the chief answer, and then I'd really like some of the police officers to weigh in, because it's a different job for them. It's a different perspective for them. I sit in an office, I get to meet with all of my command staff, I get to meet with attorneys, and we talk about policies, and we talk about how we can improve those policies or what policies need to be adjusted. And we have conversations with those line employees to make sure that as we adjust those policies, we're not creating hazards for them. We're not creating barriers for them to be able to do their jobs and do their jobs safely. So I'll tell you the chief answer, and then I'd really like to hear our employees talk about how that then affects them and what they see from the training and from the policies that we enact, because I think their perspective would be more in line of what our community is looking for. So we teach de-escalation, and we don't just teach de-escalation in a block of instruction. When you go through our police academy, we use a regional police academy. Once those men and women have passed their basic law enforcement license and received their license, they come back to the Irving Police Department for 9 weeks of additional training. And then throughout the years of service, we do incumbent training, and we do 40 hours of incumbent training every year. TCO, which is our licensing agency in the state of Texas, they only require us to do 20 hours. We do 40 hours every year of training. And we weave in de-escalation training into everything we do. When we talk about use of force, when we teach defensive tactics, when we qualify with our firearms, when we take firearms courses, when we're talking about mental health, we're weaving de-escalation tactics through that. We talk about this is what's allowed, but how do you avoid getting to that situation? You're faced with this issue, so how do you work your way through that issue without having to use force, without having to go hands-on with someone, without having to display a taser or a firearm? And then we put that to practical use when we go down and do scenarios. And we encourage and train our employees that if they use those techniques that they were taught in the classroom, they end up not having to use force in those scenarios. And so it becomes a mindset, and it becomes second nature to our employees. As we looked at our policies, and we changed our policies back in 2016 after President Obama's Task Force on 21st Century Policing released their recommendations on policing, especially as it relates to uses of force. And so we adopted some of those recommendations: shooting at cars, de-escalation. We then took another look after the George Floyd incident, and where can we continue to adapt our policies? We've used LVNR, the lateral vascular neck restraint, since long before I started here. And it has been a very effective tool for us. I know of no uses of the LVNR, the lateral vascular neck restraint, at the Irving Police Department that ever resulted in serious injury to anyone it was applied to. But what we recognized as an organization was our community wasn't comfortable with us using that tool anymore. And we have since taken that out of our use of force options. We've stopped training on that. So, we need to be responsive to what our community expects from us. I reminded our employees we're public servants, and our public gets to have a say in the type of service we deliver. So we've taken out the LVNR. We've created a specific policy with specific language in an officer's duty to intervene. If they see a fellow officer or a fellow employee using force that they find that's excessive or they think is going beyond what our training should do, they have a duty to step in and stop that. They also then have a duty to report that incident to their supervisor. If they do use force, up to and including deadly force, as soon as it's safe to do so, they're to render first aid to the person that's injured. And so, those are some of the changes that we've made from a policy perspective. But again, I'd like to hear our employees talk about how they feel like it's impacting their work.
So Chief, I apologize, but I'm going to interrupt you for a second. I know one of our panelists, Tony, Tony's getting ready to leave. He has another commitment. Another of his many involvements in the community is calling him out. So Tony, before you leave, do you want to say a message? Do you want to make a comment before you leave? And thank you again for participating and giving your precious time to this talk.
Well, yes, thank you all for having me and allowing me to be a part of this panel. It's a great job that our police department does, Chief Spivey and the police department here in Irving. I would like to leave my contact and communication information for anybody that's listening who needs to contact the NAACP. It's Tony Grimes. My phone number is 214.
Membership for 2020-2021. And Dr.
Sorry about that. My phone number is 214-315-3151. Tony Grimes at prodigy.net. Let me get out of here, man. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so now that we recap and we have a few moments left in our meeting, and I want to make sure that we answer some of the questions that we still have, but I want to make sure that I give the community members the chance to ask and interact. So after we're done with this question, when we discuss the training with the police officers, Bishop Kelly, Deepan Patel, and Heather Foster, please, if you have any questions, any comments, just feel free to interact and jump in. We're going to conclude the answer that we were discussing before Tony left. So with regards to training, the policy changes, neck restraints, from the side of the officers, do you feel that the department is giving you all the tools necessary to be able to do policing, but policing in a way where you're thinking, you know, towards the future, towards the department, towards the community with these changes?
Yeah, thanks, Chaim. So since I came here to this department 8 years ago, I mean, I've received de-escalation training many times throughout. And our department, I feel, is very good at constantly looking at ways we can make things better. And I think it's a city culture, because I see it in other areas of the city, even all the way to the waste management and fleet services. You're constantly seeing ways that things can be done better. As far as the culture of the street, of what happens, you always got to remember that it's not solely up to us, the success of the de-escalation techniques. We do everything we can to de-escalate, but there is also a citizen or a group of citizens that are going to make up their own mind when it comes to whether they're going to be peaceful or whether they're not going to be peaceful. And it doesn't even have to be physical. It can just be verbal. I pulled over a man today going 103 miles an hour on 161, and he spent 3 minutes lighting me up on the side of the road. There was nothing I could say to change his mind that 103 was unacceptable on the turnpike. So that's just something you got to keep in mind. The success of de-escalation is not solely upon the officer, and our department does do a very good job at training for it, as well as holding us accountable by policy as a collective to stick to that policy.
Perfect, perfect. So now from the panel, Deepan, Bishop Kelly, and Heather, do you have any comments, any questions? Deepan, I see you
have
unmute
something
yourself.
I'd like to say, yes.
All right, ladies first, and then Deepan, I will go with you. So
Thank
Heather,
you so
please.
much. Yes, I wanted to also reiterate about the Shop Talk experience. Within the program, I had the opportunity through the Irving Police Department to participate in the RAD program. So I wanted to speak to my experience in the RAD program. RAD stands for the Rape Aggression Defense course that I attended. It was about a 9-week course, and it taught theory as well as technical skills about self-defense. So anyone can participate in that. That was something that Officer Plunkett introduced to me amongst of other programs that the Irving Police Department actually host from time to time. That is one that everyone, especially women, should participate in, knowing how to arm yourself with knowledge and techniques that could save your life. So that was something that I participated in, and I mean, it was one of the most empowering experiences that I actually had in a long time. So I implore you to get involved in your community, and, you know, arm yourself with knowledge.
Yeah. Heather, you bring a great point, because I'm going to talk about also a personal experience. 8-9 years ago, when I was an employee at the district attorney, I worked with some of the police officers at the department, and we took that RAT program, and it was presented to the Dallas County District Attorney's Office female employers. And there was a group of them who signed up. That we put the whole program together, and a group, prosecutors, investigators, even law enforcement, investigators, secretaries, legal assistants, a nice group of female employees of the DA's office participated in the RAP program, and that was a great program. And at the same time, my wife is a second grade teacher in a local school here in Irving ISD. She teaches for STIPE, and she participated also in the RAP program, and the confidence that it gives you. So I implore to any community member right now who is watching this, we know that because of COVID, there will be a lot of restrictions and these programs will not be able to be put in place at this moment. But I know that Charlie is ready to answer the phone, regarding the juntos, with the Citizen Police Academy, with volunteer opportunities, and with the RAP program. Start that conversation. As a community member, I know that many members in the community want to get involved, want to volunteer, want to get these classes, as Heather mentioned. What better way right now to start planning for the next months to come? And we know that this COVID thing is going to pass hopefully soon, and we can start getting to a normal sense like before. And it will be a great point that, some of these programs are already in place. So Heather, thank you very much for bringing that point.
Absolutely, I agree.
Epen, let me go with you, and then Bishop, I will go with you next after.
Okay, I first of all, I just wanted to thank everybody for having this conversation. It's important to have the dialogue. It is important to reciprocate. Over the past 10 years with PAPS charities and different support to different organizations that the city of Irving cares about, whether it's Keep Irving Beautiful, the Family Advocacy Center, the fire department, the police department. I believe that community makes, it just, you and me make this community. It shouldn't be incumbent upon just the police department to make strides. I think it is also upon us as community members to work with them. As Officer Allen mentioned, it takes both of us. We have to work together, and we have been. We've got a great relationship with the city of Irving. And one thing I do enjoy is City of Irving, the police department participating in social media, especially during COVID. An example I heard of was the Irving Police Department posting regular updates on Nextdoor. I think it's a great way to keep people informed about what's going on, what investigations are active, it just general awareness. And I think the more aware we are, the safer we are as a community. And we would love to continue to the partnership there we have with the city of Irving. And I just wanted to thank everybody for a tremendous job that they do.
Bishop?
I just wanted to thank Chief Spivey for the invitation to be part of the panel. One thing that's really stood out to me is Heather Foster. I don't know, I've never met you before, but just your program, the Shop Talk, because a lot of times we think about the Catholic parish as being a place where there can be a conversation in a place there's less tension, and so so people can really hear each other and see each other, and it's not a fraught situation. And I was just so grateful to hear about the way that yours also serves as a place like that, where it's a de-escalation tactic also, because it enables people to get to know each other. The other thing that kind of stood out was Officer Allen, your comment about de-escalation takes more than one person de-escalating. And I think sometimes the default position, because of so much tension following the George Floyd thing, is that, well, the police must have done something wrong there because this interaction didn't go well, as opposed to saying, well, there's two people here, and if you can't talk to somebody going 103 miles an hour and just admitting they're doing something wrong, then it's more than, oftentimes that's what people are doing. There's no acknowledgement that they're at fault. So that's another issue. Those situations are just tense in and of themselves. So I'm very grateful for the work that all of you do, and just hearing. I live in Irving, but a lot of my focus is on Dallas because that's where I work. And so to hear more of what's going on in the Irving community I'm just so grateful for that, and grateful to be part of the conversation. And I'm going to have to drop off the conversation in about 2 minutes because I have to go on to something else.
Well, thank you very much, Bishop. I would really appreciate the time that you have taken and the input that you have given us. It's not every day that you have an auxiliary bishop to be able to Zoom, and these new Zoom realities, we're all blessed to have you here and have the insight.
Well, that goes both ways, because not every day I get to sit and talk with all of you either, and to hear about the good work that you're doing in the same community in which I live. So thank you so much. And may God bless you all.
Thank you, Bishop. Now,
Thank
Chief,
you. God bless you, Bishop.
I'm going to put you in the spot in two things, Chief. These two next topics are coming to you because I want to hear from you. One is because the question goes directly to you. We have a question on Facebook from Jesse. It says, do you think that police education courses in secondary education could help improve police-citizen relationships? And do you think that more people going through the ride-alongs with IPD will help as well? Let's take the first part. The question goes directly to you. It was asked to you. You and I met a few years ago when you were assistant chief, and we met because of a program in a high school. And I think that I'll give you a lot of credit because this Irving ISD program won an award, and we both went to Arizona to receive the award with the Irving ISD. And in part was the relationship of the police department with the high schoolers. So what is your point? What do you think about it? What do you think that this program, and talk a little bit about it, about what the police department is doing with the Jack Sinley Academy program, and what do you feel that it's a benefit to the police community relationships?
So I'll start with the short answer, yes. Anytime we can expose our employees to new ideas, to different educations, to different cultures, to different ways of doing things, we're going to be able to better respond to the needs of our community. So whether it's taking classes at a community college, whether it's the leadership classes that we do through the police academy or through a number of the police institutions that we send employees to, the more exposure we can give our employees to outside ideas, the better able they are to respond to the challenges of the job. Now, we started, you and I, as you stated, you and I started a program. We worked with the Jack Singley Academy, the CTE program, the Career Technical Education program, to develop a law enforcement curriculum so that we could start attracting young men and young women who were entering high school to the field of law enforcement. And we developed a curriculum so that a student going into the Jack Singley Academy and the law enforcement program could start taking law enforcement specific classes their freshman year. And by the time they graduated high school, not only would they have complete exposure and opportunity to law enforcement through the internship program that occurs the senior year, but because of the partnerships we were able to develop with North Lake Community College, they can graduate with an associate's degree in criminal justice. And so that puts them so far ahead of the curve in making them viable candidates for policing jobs. And so that program was specific to, and I know you'll remember me saying this, I wanted to create a pipeline from the Jack Singley Academy to the Irving Police Department. If we're truly going to recruit a workforce that resembles our community, then we need to recruit from our community. And when you look at the Irving Independent School District, it's over 70% Hispanic. I think when the census numbers come out next year, you'll find that the population of Irving is approaching 50% Hispanic. We're nowhere near that as a department. But if we can create programs like that at the Jack Singley Academy, where we're getting those kids early on, we're getting them interested in policing, we're giving them an opportunity to, as soon as they graduate high school, they're well on their way to being an Irving police officer, then over time, we'll begin to mirror the community diversity that we have within the organization. The second part of that is I challenge myself and I challenge everyone around me to look for ideas, look for programs, look for books, look for news articles that don't necessarily align with your traditional way of thinking. I encourage people, if you're a conservative, watch CNN News. If you're more liberal-minded, watch Fox News. Get as many different perspectives as you can, because when you go to a call for service, you're not going to get to just go to a call involving someone who's aligned with your way of thinking. We've talked about the diversity of our community. I have Mr. Patel on here. If I go to Mr. Patel's house and I try to assert my conservative Christian values on Mr. Patel, we're gonna maybe butt heads a little bit because we're not gonna understand each other. But the more I hang around Mr. Patel, the more events I go to at the BAPS charity, the more I understand Mr. Patel's culture, the more I'm better able to relate and better able to help solve the problems that that community is having. So making sure that you're as well-rounded a person as possible in order to do the job of policing will ensure your success as a police officer. You can't have a narrow look at life in general and then expect to be successful when you show up at a call for service and you have no idea the difficulty that person came from, the cultural expectations that person has, the religious background that person came from. You're never going to be able to make that connection unless you have an understanding of that person all the way around. The only way you do that is to immerse yourself in education.
Okay, perfect. Well, Chief, I have my last question to you before we conclude is, what has been the response of the police department to the approach or the organization 8 Can't Wait? I know that the police department has made a response. We have been published in the website, but we want to hear from the chief of what this response is. What is the police department doing about it?
So I'll tell you, we addressed that early on. The 8 Can't Wait campaign was a little misleading when they said we only, I think, fell in line with one of the 8 statements that they put out. When you look at the 8 statements, we actually fell in line with all of them. They were using our policies from 2015 when they were comparing us to the other organizations or the 8 Can't Wait mantra. When you look at our policies, and we put this out on our social media, I'll make sure our social media team shares that again tonight after this so that people can see it again. But we actually, I think, are compliant with all 8 of those statements. And certainly now that we have banned the LVNR, so we certainly ban the chokehold now. We've always banned the chokehold, but so many people consider the chokehold being the lateral vascular neck restraint as well. Any constriction around the throat, people automatically consider a chokehold, but we've banned that now. So we're certainly in line with all of those 8 Can't Wait principles, and I'll be sure to share that tonight after this program on Facebook so that people can double check that.
Perfect. Thank you, Chief. Thank you very much for answering that. And I want to thank everybody who is in this panel today and the ones who have had to step up out of it. We had a great conversation today. We covered an array of different topics from diversity, females in the workforce, in the police department, Hispanics, minorities, hirings, what's the process of review of officers, what's the process of hiring so the department hires the good candidates with the good history. We cover a lot of different programs like the Shop Talk and the RAD program. We discuss how the police department is approaching minorities. We talk about the programs with the Hispanic community. And I think we covered a lot of different topics. We answer almost all questions that we had, and the ones that we didn't answer directly were all lumped together. So if anybody's watching this program right now and they felt that the question was not answered, I will ask you to watch the program from the beginning, because it's already an hour and 45 minutes of this talk. And I appreciate the willingness of the police department to put this program together and to be open to have these questions be asked in public and live. So I really appreciate Chief for your hard work, and I appreciate Officer Allen, Officer Cavazos, Officer Moore, Sergeant Miller, and Officer Reeve. And with this said, Officer Reeve, I'm passing this back to you so we can conclude the program.
Hey, Ham, if you don't mind, before as Robert jumps on, I want to give a shout out to Officer Allen. This didn't come about because the Chief of Police thought we needed to do this. and I think it speaks to the quality of the employees that we have. This program came about because Officer Allen saw an opportunity and a need for the Irving Police Department to get out into our community and really talk about these issues. And so thanks to Officer Allen, truly caring about the relationship between the police department and our community and ensuring that he holds his police department accountable to doing the right thing. Those are the kinds of employees that make policing great. Those are the kinds of employees that make our profession what I consider the most noble of all professions, and why I think we have a great future, not only here in Irving, but across our profession. So thank you to Officer Allen and all of those men and women who work every day to do their very best to ensure that our relationship with our community stays strong.
Okay, as we close up this community and law enforcement event this evening, once again, thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you for everybody that logged on and your comments that you shared through Facebook. I just wanted to let everybody know if we missed your question, then we will be responding to you individually on the comment thread there within the Facebook stream. Once again, the answers to the 8 can't wait that the chief spoke about, you can locate on our website at irvingpd.com. That is an opportunity for you to see all of our answers to that specific question, and to also follow up where we'll be posting our policies. That's something that we're working on as well. So thank you again for this evening. We anticipate hosting several more of these events down the road, and we appreciate your time tonight. Thank you. Good night.